I am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Liz Armbruester. She is the SVP of Global Compliance for Avalara. She oversees global compliance operations and brings more than 20 years of leadership experience from a variety of technology sectors, including software, media, and services, and is known for her strong track record of innovative problem solving, process optimization, and an ability to deliver automation for efficiency and scale. During this interview, we discuss what it takes to innovate from the little things to the big initiatives. We go over what the process of learning is and how to get everyone involved and excited when dealing with change management in an organization. This episode is sponsored by Avalara. Did you know that 52% of accounting practitioners, large and small, still rely on spreadsheets and manual processes for sales tax compliance? Using Avalara's award-winning technology, you can move your accounting practice to the 21st century and start to grow your client advisory services or tax compliance service lines. The Avalara for Accountants automation platform helps accounting service providers of all sizes grow their service offerings with sales tax prep, filing, transfer pricing, tax research, business license management, and more. Scale your practice efficiently with award-winning automation that brings efficiency and accuracy to sales tax compliance while reducing risk for your practice and your clients. To learn more, contact Avalara at accountants@avalara.com or visit them at avalara.com/accountants. I hope you enjoy this interview with Liz and take away lots of learnings to build into your innovation process. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I am interviewing Liz Armbruester. And Liz is from Avalara. And Liz, do you mind just giving a brief introduction on yourself before we get started?
Happy to do it. Amy, thank you so much for having me here today. It's awesome to be with you.
Coming.
Yep, you bet. So yes, I work at Avalara. I have been there for about the past 9 years. I love to say that I, bust through the orange door every day, ready to solve people's tax compliance problems. And, a lot of folks say, why tax, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't sound like it'd be all that fun, but the finance nerds around here, the tax nerds really love it because it's something that everybody has to deal with. It's hard, it's complex. And, every day I get to solve problems with really, really smart people. And I don't know what's really better than that. It's pretty great. So I didn't grow up in tax. I didn't really grow up in finance, but the whole concept of hard problems and trying to figure out how to do that with people has always been a thing for me. I started out thinking maybe I'd go to medical school one day and maybe solve some of those hard problems. Life took me on a left turn instead of a right, and that's okay. But got into a lot of software and technology and systems and scaling systems and trying to bring about that use of cool technology and emerging technology, if you will, and applying that to places that can help people in their business lives. And that's really been the theme for me over the course of my career.
That's awesome. So we're going to start right in the beginning. So maybe you can just share with everyone where you grew up, what your parents did for a living, and just a little background on your family.
Yeah. So was originally a kid in Middletown, Maryland, a small community, probably of about, it felt like 3,000 people, give or take. Yeah. And parents, great parents, mom and dad, a lot of the family was from the East Coast as well. And I feel fortunate in that regard to have traveled that part of the country and really seen history, et cetera, et cetera. But my parents decided they were better apart than they were together. So nothing like picking up and moving about 2,500 miles west to the state of Washington. I'm like, y'all don't like, each other. I get that, but maybe not have to be that far apart. But that was great because I think in hindsight, it took me to a place of, hey, get out of your comfort zone, right? A lot of stuff that we talk about, and kind of lean into curiosity and lean into new opportunities. And everybody from my small community and a lot of my family, quite frankly, hadn't been west and didn't know. And oh my gosh, I'm now a left coaster. I really like the left coast. And it's so funny because a couple of my family members have since come west as well and be like, oh my God, I'm grateful. Like, I love everything about being on the East Coast and, a lot of the tradition and the history, et cetera, et cetera. And like I said, having traveled that, I just feel really blessed. But now I know this different lifestyle and, different ways of doing things, et cetera. And it's just nice to be able to, kind of hop back and forth. Yeah. So yeah, so dad was in, actually had a lot of different professions. Okay. And went between a professional wedding photographer to a lifelong educator to working in project management for commercial construction. So kind of all over the place. A stepmom who is a geologist by trade and did a lot of work for the government in departments of ecology and other. A stepdad who was an electrical engineer and worked for a small company that eventually was what took he and my mom west, and worked locally here just outside Seattle. And my mom was, for the most part, a stay-at-home mom. Early days was working in like the earliest days of software, and then stayed home to be with the four of us as kids once we were out here. Yeah, so stepbrother, stepsister, and one sister.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
And so, how old were you when your parents got divorced?
9.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
big
that's
impact.
Pretty much what you've known.
Yeah. Big impact. Yep. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, a lot of that, like, we've all lived through this mega period of change recently, still in it. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that was like my early instruct into things aren't going to stay the same. Yeah. And what does that look like? And how do you deal with that? What do you do with it? And gosh knows I didn't have the answers to that. And so life taught me a lot of things along the way that have certainly helped me now.
So when your 9-year-old self and this happens, what did you do to kind of resolve that in your head of feeling comfortable with a new way of life?
Yeah, I think it wasn't immediate.
Your parents helped.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that feels reactive and defensive, and like protectionist even. Mm-hmm. Like I'm the oldest sibling, even the oldest of the steps, but older than my sister. And so that was the immediate, firstborn, protect, insulate, let her have her life regardless of what else is going on, and really lean into ownership and responsibility. Mm-hmm. And you can do it yourself. You don't need anybody's help mentality, which maybe at some point in this conversation we'll get to later, Amy, that says, maybe that wasn't the best choice you made. And here's why. But yeah, that's what I leaned into. And there was part of that, I think, also came from my parents. I really came by that naturally of like, you do what you say you're going to do. You're fiercely independent. Being responsible really comes with a lot of empowerment, but again, a lot of weight with that. And it was really important. Personal integrity is everything to me. So I would say there was a balance of that. Like, even a skill well done can be an Achilles heel at some point. And I think that's really what I'm trying to say here is that while I leaned into that, in some ways, I leaned a little bit too far into that, and that didn't help me career-wise.
And so why do you say you leaned too far into it?
I think because you get to a place sometimes where, and I hope people all get to a place where you realize that the spirit of humans is to lean in and help one another. Like, we feel great when we're on a team and we have a mission and we're succeeding. And when we help others achieve their goals.
Mm-hmm.
And when you lean too hard into independence and are like, nope, I got it, it can be to the exclusion of people that really want to join in your success.
Right.
And my example of that is with my youngest. Both my kids are athletes, are college athletes, and one is now in semi-professional baseball. He's in the minor leagues. And my younger one was really struggling with that same mentality. And I'm like, oh my God, I've created another one.
It's funny when you can see yourself in your kids, right? You're like, oh boy, this is a mirror.
Yeah. And it was after really his formative years that I realized that's not really the best way. Like, you should really let people in because they enjoy that and it's good for you. And you don't have to be the expert in everything. Right. Having people who know more, do more, can lean in with you really makes an impact. And so he's a baseball player, he's a pitcher, and feeling that weight of, I have to do it all in an individual but a team sport, really kept him from leaning into others and learning from others, even though he really needed that and wanted it. He really kind of was carrying that weight with him for a long time. And I had to help him get over the hurdle of, you're not weak in asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually a strength when you can open up and say, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm not the most talented athlete. I need to learn. And that it triggers that whole growth mindset idea, that when you lean into curiosity, you lean into learning, you lean into growth, the continual improvement, that is, you are viewed by others as strong, not weak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we both learned that a little bit late.
Yeah. So going back to, being 9, your parents divorcing, you're about to move. What kind of shift did you find in yourself? So you said you took on responsibility and so forth, but how did that show up for you? Or do you remember a point where your brain shifted? Like I asked that question because I went through it as well, and I remember when my dad first moved out, I realized I was going to be the last one up every night, and I was going to check all the doors, and I was going to turn on the alarm, and to not be scared that I was going to, kind of be the stronger one in the house, and like really changing that mindset. And I can remember that moment of kind of talking to myself through that. So I just wonder if you remember kind of that switch, point.
Yeah, for me, it's funny because you say those things. I'm like, yep. I remember. Yep, I remember all of that. But let's go back. Right, it's the 70s,
Yeah.
late 70s, early 80s, and that moment of when one parent was at the airport and we were getting on a plane by ourselves and flying across the country. It's that I remember. Like, all of a sudden, you are the responsible person for another human.
Mm-hmm.
I was 10, right? 9 or 10 years old. So
Yeah.
that was big for me. And then I think it just started showing up in other areas. Like, okay, even when you got to the other coast and the parent was there, I didn't let go of that responsibility.
Right.
It stayed. So is she up for school on time? Is she fed? Is she doing her homework? And that transformed into, you are the responsible one because you're the one that provides consistency and balance, regardless of all the chaos that might be going on around it. And I don't want you to experience what I'm experiencing. So you get to go have fun.
Yeah.
you get to be a kid. And it wasn't that I didn't do kid things. I definitely did. But it was with that added level of responsibility.
I think it's one of those things that we see everywhere in life. I'm the oldest too, so I took on similar responsibility as you, 2 younger brothers. But we put that expectation on ourselves a lot of times. So, and this happens a lot in the work environment, wherein I'm working with accountants and they're like, oh, I have to get this done, or,
Mhm.
someone's going to be mad at me or upset. And it's like, did someone actually say that? Or did we put that expectation in our heads, right?
Yep.
Like we have the standard for ourselves or expectation for ourselves, but then we kind of blame outside circumstances,
Mhm.
not really separating like, if I didn't do this, would anyone care? you
Exactly.
know?
Exactly. Oh my gosh, Amy, when I work with it, not just women, but men also, that's one of the things that I feel like, you come packaged and you learn certain things along the way.
Right.
And prioritization for me and making those decisions, I wasn't always great at, but I do kind of have a natural skill set around that. And I realize that not everybody comes with that.
Right.
And you asking that question of, if I don't do this thing, like, does the sky fall? Like, what
Right.
happens? So much of that we put on our shoulders. And when asked that question about how do I find that just impossible place of feeling balanced between what happens at work and what happens with the rest of my life, whatever that rest of your life looks like, that's one of the frameworks that I try to help other people through, which
Mhm.
is, what are those things and who's asking you, and why are we doing them?
Right.
And when you actually say those things out loud, sometimes you get that aha moment of, huh, maybe I don't have to do that thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe
And
that's,
then
and how
maybe,
do I let go?
and how, oh my God, the let go
Yeah.
part is the hard part.
Yeah.
And I got asked by another gal. It was a professor of mine at one point in my career, and when I was in school, and she said, number one, the question you asked, what happens when you let go of that ball?
Hmm.
Number two, are you doing the things that only you can do? And this was happening as I'm, managing more and more and more and needing
Hmm.
to delegate and trying to balance that with this insane amount of accountability and responsibility that I carry.
Hmm.
And, that whole, can somebody else do it as good as you? And how do you help people do it as well as what you're doing? And therefore, am I doing only the things that I can do and letting others do other things? That took some time, and it is not easy to drop balls and to say, yeah, let me think about just those things that I'm best suited to do, as opposed to the other five people in the room.
So when you look back at your sister, and maybe you and your sister have discussed it, um, what is her perception? So, it's always interesting with, how we go through life with our belief systems and what we think we're contributing and how we think we're helping. And that's our perception. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily reality because we each have our own perception. So, has your sister ever said to you what her perception was and what she was feeling?
Yeah, my sister and I are very, very close. We like to think of our families as a family of eight. I know that sounds a little crazy. We definitely live separate lives, but we are, geo wise proximity to one another. She's got two kids, twins, who just started high school yesterday, and my two are 23 and 21, so out of the house. But we do a lot together, and I think that, again, the experiences you have can be so much of what you make of them. And despite the fact that parents separated, number one, I know they're better apart. They grew, and so that's okay. We've accepted that. The responsibility and accountability load that I put on myself, I own. Maybe I wasn't so cognitive of the choices I was making at the time, but we've gotten to a place where, yes, we've talked about that, and also recognize that, quite frankly, some of the choices that we made, each of us in that, going through a parent's divorce and moving across the country, et cetera, et cetera. And eventually my mom going through quite a bit of counseling as a
Yeah.
result of that, both benefited both of us, and now have this dynamic relationship where we can talk about these things openly and honestly. And, she is appreciative, without a doubt, of kind of having that insulation from other things. And at the same time, she doesn't carry guilt, but she's like, gosh, I wish I knew.
Hmm.
And, I would have taken some ownership and accountability in that too. And I'm like, but that's the whole reason I did it. So you didn't have to do that. Right.
Right.
But at the same time, because we can have that conversation. I've had it multiple times. It's done two things. Number one, I think helped us be better parents, and definitely helped us be better leaders. And she's a boss. I mean, she's got a CEO job. She's not a CEO, but it's a CEO job. And she's managing, a big group of people, lots of dollars, lots of things at stake, et cetera, et cetera. And so what she's been able to take away from, her youth and growing up, et cetera, she has wholeheartedly said, these are things I'm going to do and not do, as a result of that, and being a leader and developing through that. So, I think, to the degree that you can be all those things at the same time, for the life experiences that you've had, she and I just have a great dialogue about that, and come back to it often and say, gosh, never did we wish we could do it differently, but so grateful that we can have that conversation because we know how it feeds into our lives now.
Yeah. And I think also, just thinking into that whole scheme of letting go, a lot of times we are holding on for a need for ourselves, right? Like, not just helping them, but being needed. And so really allowing yourself to separate and being very honest with why you're doing what you're doing. Because a lot of times, we want to believe it's fully altruistic, like everything we're doing is for somebody else. But when we think about it, like sometimes, like in a work environment, we're holding on because we're afraid, like out of fear. If we let go, would that threaten my job, or would someone be smarter? And, or we want to be needed. We want, people to constantly come to us and not completely be self-sufficient, or we might feel that way about our clients or whatever that is. And that's a really hard truth sometimes, to look yourself in the mirror and say, why can't I let go? Or, because some of it is selfish interest. It's not necessarily for someone else. It's a personal need that we have.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And the flip side of that is what truly matters to me. And oh my gosh, number one, does that change over your life? And number two, I feel like the focus gets more narrow around really, truly what matters, and therefore the behavior of why do I do the things I do. And, one of the things that I do know is true about me, has been true about me for the entirety of my life, is my family is first. It's everything. And I've had to I've elected to and needed to make choices based on that belief. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that that's the mode I went into with my sister. That's, those are the choices I made around having children when I had children, and said, I want to balance that with my life, and this is how I'm going to show up. And when when two things that I believed were true were running in opposite directions, i.e. family was first and I wasn't showing up for dinner, like I got hit with a 2x4 at that moment and needed to behave differently in order to do that. And when your values are running counter to your why, and how you're showing up, sometimes it does take that moment of self-reflection. And, do I need to do this? Do I want to do this? How am I doing this, et cetera, are all great questions to ask. And I think that, to your point, sometimes I always believe it's okay when you're authentic about your reason why. Like, if I really have a need to be needed, okay, let me own that.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Like, be honest.
That's okay.
Yeah.
No, it's not a right or wrong. It's not a judgment call. It's this is the thing that I know about me. And, for me, I'm the peacemaker. I'm the one that holds the family together. And I honor that about myself. I love that. And therefore I need to show up in certain ways to do that. And when I don't, I feel like I'm off balance. And because not only does that fulfill a need for me, but it also makes me happy when I'm doing that role. And that's oftentimes some part of the question that can get missed. I think people might say, I need to be needed. That's part of it. And when you feel that way, what does it do for you?
Yeah.
Right. And answering that second question can sometimes come back and say, well, maybe I don't actually need to do that thing when the why doesn't associate with the feeling. And that's just, again, kind of part of life's journey that you always want to be reassessing.
Yeah.
I've always said that it's helpful also when you have people in your circle who are your mirror champions.
Mm-hmm.
And, you always talk about, you want a coach and you want a mentor and you want friends and et cetera, those folks, right, that are in your inner circle. But the one that's the most valuable to me is the one that's willing to hold the mirror. And when you've got, the willingness to go look at that mirror and say, not only do I look at it, but I'm going to think on it and I'm going to do, and what is it saying to me, et cetera, et cetera. And that often the mirror person oftentimes is what can drive that conversation around, am I being needy? Do I need to feel needed? Why do I need to feel needed? And how is that appearing to not just me, but everybody else around me, et cetera. So an important part of, folks that are around me, I've got, and I have more than one mirror champion.
Yeah. We all need those.
Yeah, we do.
We need the people that disagree with us all the time too.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
So as far as your trajectory and your career today, so how did you end up doing what you're doing? Where did you start out?
So I mentioned earlier in this podcast, definitely thought I'd go the medical, which is not surprising given, plate spinning. I like to problem solve. I'm definitely science minded. I got my degree was in molecular biology and now I'm in tax. So yes, that was a different road. But I, said at one point, kind of back to this family value, I really want to have kids kind of by a certain age and want to stay grounded and invested in their lives when I'm at a physical place to be able to do that in a way that I want to show up. And that conflicted with medical school. It was like, no, that's not going to happen. So what else can we do and apply skill set? And so I had children and was working in the medical field, which transitioned to software because we're thinking late 90s. And software in the medical space was becoming a thing. And I started working on understanding what that was and implementations, et cetera. And that transitioned me into a couple of other medical jobs that then took me into semiconductors. Again, just needed a change of job. But again, learning process, learning technology. And I'll go back to things that really matter to me, which have been thematic for my entire career: hand raising, curiosity, lifelong learner, et cetera. So a lot of the jump in jobs that I had was, hey, I don't understand. Can you help me? Let me learn that thing. Can I be a part of that project? That kind of stuff. And I'm a doer and I value execution a lot, right? Again, back to give me a thing. I'm going to commit to doing that thing. I'm going to do it really well, better than anybody else. And when I say it's going to be done, it's going to be done right. So I went from that medical software technology, semiconductor, learned a ton about business in that particular role, to having outside of work, a relationship through sports. And again, it comes back to baseball. A lot of my life is centered around this 5-ounce ball with 108 stitches on it. I was coaching T-ball at the time and met a family who are now lifelong friends with me and connected later through business. And he was the CFO of a venture capital firm, had invested in a company, knew my skill set and said, hey, listen, we need some help over here. I think this would be a great opportunity for you. Let's talk about it. That became, I'm like, yes, that sounds great. Let's go do that. That became a 7-year stint in a content company. Content different than tax, but I say content intentionally because that content was about things that we now get on our phones and on our TVs, et cetera, streaming, live content, file-based content, et cetera, from point of production to us as consumers. And if you think about tax compliance, all you CPA fans out there, it's content, right? And it follows a process, and not different than TV or file-based movies and things that we consume on our devices. Like we do at Avalara, we sit in the middle of that. So a transaction happens or a TV show gets produced, and it needs to follow a process of getting reformatted and out ultimately to a consumer or a taxing jurisdiction. And our company sat in the middle of that. I ran operations for that company. And so taking lots of data in a time compressed way, putting it into a bunch of different formats and getting it somewhere on time and accurately. And when I realized that was a lot like tax, I'm like, okay, I can make this jump into tax, even though really the only thing I know about tax is that when I go to buy shoes at Nordstrom's, they charge me an extra $10 on my $100 pair of shoes. But it was really about taking an idea that scales. How do you do that? And how do you do that in an environment that is constantly changing? But the one part that I left out in that story, I foreshadowed earlier, and that was I was working in this content company. It was called Avail Media, which later became Vubiquity. And I loved what I did. Same thing, like really cool problems, really, really smart people, loved what I did. And I wasn't showing up for dinner. And that was the conflict of family. Like I was for months and months and months playing from Seattle to California every week. And I took my kids to what was high school and junior high and kind of looked at them and I'm like, when did you become 13 and 11? Because like yesterday you were 5 and 7.
Yeah.
And it was like a dagger to my heart. It was like, nope, we're not going to do this. I don't know what that looks like tomorrow, but it's not going to be this. And when you child graduate from high school, the only thing I know is I'm not going to feel the way I feel right now, which is, not where I've put my priorities. And that's what transitioned me into this opportunity at Avalara, and been there ever since, and have been able to commit to that. I can tell you, when my oldest walked across the stage at his high school graduation, I had been there, I had shown up. I remembered how he got from 13 to 17, and was off to college, and felt very whole and very good about that. And that wasn't an easy transition. It wasn't like, oh my God, you found balance every day. No, it was like some days you had it, some days you didn't. But generally over the course of 4 years, do you feel like you did it well? Yeah, I did.
Yeah. And that's important because you still have to fill your cup in it,
Yes.
and finding the right role when you make that transition. Because one thing that I think I'm, seeing in you is you're not a maintenance person. You like projects. You like to keep, the learning process going. Some people are good maintenance people. Once you get the project finished, they are good to stick with it for however long. And it is important to know what those things are about you that keep your interest and excitement as well, so you don't have to keep jumping around.
That's why tax is so cool, because it never stops changing. But you're exactly right. I mean, I have so much respect for the folks that say, hey, I'm really good at, and I know it.
Right.
And, it looks like I work in a private company, or I work in a public, or I work in a 500-person company, or a 10,000-person company, or I like to design, or no, I like to run. Like when you said, when the system's up and it's going, I'm your maintenance person. Like you can count on me to do that. And that makes me happy. And yeah, that's not me. I love the problem solving. I love the challenge and the inconsistency of it, because for the plate spinner in me, and the person who, loves to develop people and develop technology simultaneously, that's really cool to be able to do that. And I know that about myself.
Yeah. So, knowing what you've learned about yourself, I mean, you're really leading innovation thinking and design thinking and so forth. So, how do you push past people's barriers, of their internal barriers that fear? You talked about that yourself, of, when you had this new thing happening when you were 9, you become resistant to change. You start holding on to whatever you can hold on to. And so that's true in any kind of change management or innovation, and to break through that and get people's ideas and have them come along with you. So what have you had to learn as a leader to help people through that process?
Yeah, a couple of things. And it's a great question. Number one, like fear of failure was a big thing for me. Like just,
Mm-hmm.
didn't just couldn't comprehend failure and the fear of it really held me back. And I think that's also true of change, right? If I change, I fail.
Right.
I'm not going to be successful, et cetera. And so, somebody said, hey, listen, the fail is not what you think it is. It's your first attempt in learning.
Right.
Like, great. Love that. That was like game changer mindset. It's all about growth. It's less about staying static. And so that was a kind of one of my first mantras was like, hey, you can lean into this learning mindset around this. Number two is I try to help people think past their first impression and their first thought,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that often then leads to, for people who really struggle with that, okay, if these are your assumptions, if this is the first thought, what if that wasn't true? people people line up all of their assumptions, right? And I like to think of it as a bowling alley. Like, what if you were to take that bowling ball and roll it down the alley and you do some assumption bowling and they all fall down? Like, what would happen?
Mm-hmm.
And that helps people without going to that place of I'm going to go do something or I'm going to jump into that, get comfortable with, and these are the most change resistant people, is really thinking about, okay, maybe that wouldn't be so bad, or maybe this gives me an opportunity, or maybe I could think about this thing differently, or maybe the worst possible thing I could think of really isn't the worst possible thing after all. And then you can start to begin to transform into the what ifs on the positive side. Could this create an opportunity for you? Have you thought about it this way? um, and oftentimes, to make that jump, to cross that chasm, you have to know people personally. You have to be, or at least curious enough to be asking questions about what matters to them. What do they value? Where do they want their career to go? What do they foresee happening in the company? What does Kate or Bill look like in the next year or the next 5 years? And so for me, it's really about trying to tie those things together, being a great listener and leaning in and helping them lean into the curiosity, so that, again, we can get some of these initial biases out of the way, begin to spark a little bit of creativity and innovation, still in a safe space, and kind of go at their pace, but help them connect their future version of themselves, their career, et cetera, to dive into that often uncomfortable place of change. And it really is just helping them bridge that through a lot of questions and curiosity.
So, you being not new to the profession at this point, but having, been working with accountants, I guess, for the last 9 years
Mm-hmm.
at Avalara, what has been your observation of the ones that can truly innovate, move forward with new ways of thinking, um, and the ones that are harder to pull along?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to that. When we do hiring, for example, right, we're not just hiring innovators. We have an outsourced tax return service as part of what we do. And so you're looking at financially minded accountant type, and I put that into a broad category, right, of people where I love to say, like, this 2 + 2 is 4 every single time. It's done the same way. It's consistent. We like consistent and we like being accurate. And at the same time, part of what we have to look for is, yes, I want 2 + 2 to equal 4 next month, but I want you to do it in a way that helps you do it better, do it faster, have less manual touch, right, for you, so that somehow your job is enhanced.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes with the folks that are what I would say are a little bit more stuck, right, in where they are, less open and a kind of embracing of change, it gets down to, how can we make your life better? How can we make your job easier, your job better? And sometimes it's those micro twists of thinking through, what is that thing that you really don't like doing? And that if you had a little bit more time in your day, what would you love to do?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see your personal value? What lights your fire? Where's your passion, et cetera? you love being an accountant and you love doing certain things. Would you love to spend more time doing that? And what keeps you from doing that thing? And sometimes that's what it takes to get people into a little bit of innovative thinking. They may not come up with the idea, but the minute you turn that dial to, oh my gosh, I would love to spend more time doing this. How do we get you to do that? And then all of a sudden they feel invested in saying, oh yeah, I want to dump that thing over here. I don't want to do that ever again. And that oftentimes can be the fire, right? That says, hey, like it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. In fact, it would be a good thing if I didn't do that anymore. And again, they may not be the one that comes up with the ideas, but when you get them to that place, then you can start to ping a couple of ideas like, hey, what if we did it this way? Or if we did this, or if we didn't do that thing, but we did this thing instead. And they can start to trickle in and kind of get into the shallow water. And all of a sudden they're swimming in the deep end with the rest of us saying, oh yeah, I don't even know why I hung on to that thing for so long, because it didn't add any value. And I now get to do this thing that I love.
And I think it's an important point to the MicroTwist, because when you're leading people through change, if you try to throw everything that you plan to do right at that beginning phase, it's overwhelming. There's going to be lots of resistance. It's almost better if they just know a little bit of change at a time. And then when they look back, they're like, wow, I can't believe how much we've done. And, you know, if you're a leader going through this process, like you said, it's really important to have an open mind. I'm working with a firm right now, really doing a wholesale change in how they do business. And the managing partner will continuously say, I hired her because she thinks opposite from me. But that is really, really hard. You can say that, but then on a daily, weekly basis, when you're trying to work with someone that thinks opposite of you, and you know you're doing the right thing by doing it, but it's like taking every ounce of your energy to not scream or cry during the process.
It is for sure. I think a couple of things you said just made me think of a few items. Number one, in that change management process, staying in discovery, especially when folks maybe like I think you might be, but for sure me, who tend to get to execution really fast and say, I want to do, because I'm so biased to that. Spending time in discovery can be one of the most important things around change management. It really helps you understand your why. It helps people give an opportunity to understand your why, to get on board, to understand how they fit in. For you as a change management facilitator to understand all of your stakeholders and to know the factions of people and where they sit. And it helps not only get them on board, but when you know you're going to run into the, hey, I've got an opposite thinker out there, you have spent time thinking about, okay, I already know that might be coming, and here's how I can help mitigate through that. Here's how I can, otherwise try to get the person on board, et cetera. Second, as a good facilitator, I always like to think about change being on the spectrum. It's not a singular line. And your ability to help the team go through that oscillates. But you have to know where the boundaries are of, I'm pushing hard enough, right? So I'm not down here at the bottom. They're up above the minimum threshold line. But I also haven't exceeded the, I'm running too fast and driving too much change at the same time. I feel like those are the red zones.
Yeah.
And so, when you can work through that and anticipate what's coming, you do that well when you spend enough time in discovery.
Yeah. Both those things are so important. And I like the first one you said about staying in that discovery phase long enough. I find people really get antsy doing that.
They do.
Because they want result. Well, we did this because we want result. But if we don't fully complete that stage and do all the research we need to do and uncover as many ideas as possible, you lose so many things when you actually go to implementation. And a lot of times what people don't realize is when they're in that discovery phase, they're already kind of implementing and changing without even realizing it. They just don't know if they're already part of the process.
That's right.
And the second thing you said about pushing hard enough but not too much where you overwhelm people, I think that is one thing as a leader, again, when you look in the mirror, when you feel that pressure point, is to be okay with being transparent and stopping and saying to everybody, I can feel you. I feel what's happening here. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what we need to stop doing so that we prioritize the most important things. And I think a lot of times what gets people in trouble in that area is they just keep pushing because they're going to just keep pushing against the deadline when it's overwhelming people, and then the whole thing fails, and then you're left with that. And so really being transparent and self-aware during this process is really important.
It's hugely important, right? And the folks on your project team are looking to you to do that and have enough sensitivity, empathy, right? To know, hey, I'm checking in. I understand. I know where we should be. What's your temperature? And having that ability to command and say, we need to turn it back for just a second, right? And when we do that, we know what's at risk, right? Yes, I might be putting the timeline at risk, and it maybe has an association of these dollars, but we're going to prioritize quality, right? This is something we said we were going to do back here, and that matters.
And
that
dinners.
Yes, exactly. Right. Exactly. But that's what engenders trust, right?
Yeah.
In the team. And that's what creates the opportunity, maybe sometimes for you, you are working consistently from, with the same team over and over again, and sometimes it's not. But at the end of the day, even if it's not you leading that, you're going to leave a team that now knows how to work together, maybe in a different way, that has that basis of trust that says, hey, I can shout out when I'm not feeling great about this, or if I have a question, et cetera. And, I read something a while ago about, it came out of the military, but talking about, the independent worker, and, who maybe is super, super high quality team star, et cetera. And those folks who, maybe aren't as qualified or don't have the skill set, but really work well as a team. And they're always going to take the latter, right? They're going to take maybe a little bit less quality, but folks that can have that relationship, work together, that have trust, et cetera. And sometimes that means a time trade-off, and sometimes that means a cost trade-off too, maybe less so in the military in that particular situation. But wow, does that matter? I mean, when you want to talk about total results and getting a team aligned to think about the quality of what they've produced and the success and the recognition that they get as a result of that, like I said, humans are engineered to want to do great things, right? And do it together with other people. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Yeah. So many great lessons and tips that you've given. I like to end with some rapid fire questions. So you pick a category.
Okay.
The category is family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Oh, let's go with health.
Okay. Things or actions I don't have that I do want, as far as
God, I need to be more fit. I've recently turned that 50 dial, and yeah, so it's more important than ever. I've always been athletically minded. I want to stay feeling young, doing things that I love to do. And yeah, I need to maybe spend a little bit more time being outdoors and doing things that support my overall health.
Yeah. Things or actions that I do have that I want to keep.
I eat well. I would say that, right? So I'm definitely tuned into that. And I also, like I said, I'm still out there doing a ton of things and trying to keep up with my kids. And so yeah, I feel like I'm doing that well on the health front.
Things or actions that I don't have that I don't want to have.
Oh gosh, I don't ever want to run anywhere. And as far as fitness goes. So I've learned the things that I get inspired about doing, and that I can kind of keep up doing, like
that give you energy.
Yeah, like hot yoga is amazing, and I love that. Love to ride bikes and things like that, but gosh, keep me away from running anywhere.
I was running on the beach, and I'm not a fast runner, but I was just running one day on vacation. I ran past a woman wearing a shirt in big letters that says "I hate running" as she was running. I thought that was like so perfect.
That's pretty funny. That's pretty
good. The last one: things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
I don't know if I have an answer to that. Things that I have around health that I don't want. I don't know. I don't think there's anything. I mean, I'm pretty good about making those choices and saying these are things I do and I don't, and I'm intentional about that. So I don't
Yeah.
know that I have anything in that
Well, that's
category.
good.
Yeah.
So, is there anything that we haven't discussed or that you want to emphasize as some takeaways for the people that have listened to this interview today?
Gosh, I think you guys have probably heard me say it like thematically throughout the career, curiosity, hand raising, leaning in, growth mindset. Like those are the things. They're game changers. I mentioned I went back to school. It was actually a little bit more recent than what you might think. I got my MBA in May of this year.
Oh,
So
good for you. Congrats.
COVID degree, thank you. But I kind of forgot how much I liked the academic learning. Like
Uh-huh.
I'm a learner and I like to read, but just you go and learn a thing and it's not for the purpose of an objective at work.
Right.
Right? I was like, oh yeah, I remember how to do that and how great that feels. And having a discussion with people just to have a discussion was really
Right.
awesome. And
Yeah.
so I'm going to carry that torch forward and say it to as many people as possible. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I love that. I was listening to a meditation, and in it they were talking about music, and that when you're listening to a really great song, you don't want it to end.
Yeah.
You want to be right in the middle. And that's the thing about learning is like you're like you want to be in the middle of that process, the good stuff, the when your brain is just exploding with ideas, and to not rush that part because that's the fun, right?
That is the fun. Yeah. It's absolutely the fun.
Well, great. Thank you so much for sharing your story and so many great lessons. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It's great to be here.
And now for my mindful moments with my interview with Liz that had so many great lessons about how to think like an innovator and really work that through your organization. To come to that, we talked about Liz's background of her parents getting divorced and her moving across country and the effect that that had on her to, at a young age, travel across the country by herself with her sister and really built that whole belief system of making sure that she would protect and insulate her sister from any pain or stress or fear of doing this. And early on, she took on that ownership and responsibility and herself took on the belief system that you don't need anyone else and that you do what you say you're going to do and you follow through and how important responsibility is. And so that kind of belief system really led her to really push through in her schooling and making sure that she achieved what she wanted to achieve. But what she really learned along the way is that in order for learning to happen and in order to achieve your goals, you actually have to get others involved and it can't all be on your shoulders. And a lot of us go through that hard truth of learning how to delegate, learning how to trust others with the work that we do or the work that we need to do, because we soon find out that we cannot do everything alone. And if we try to do everything alone, we're going to work around the clock. So, with what we talked about, it was really important that, her observation of having to let people in and not have to be an expert in everything and finding those people that are your gaps in your knowledge base so that you can push forward and create an even better experience or better project than if you had done it on your own. So she really learned from a young age also how to prioritize. And when we take on responsibility, that soon happens that we have to figure out is why we're doing what we're doing and what are the most important things that we need to do. But through those skills that we might learn because we have to learn as we're growing up, one of the things she realized that she had to learn was how do I let go of things and let other people do the things so that I can move forward and do the best work that I need to do and really evaluate whether other people can do the things that she can do and have that trust. And trust is such a big piece of this, to make sure that you have the ability is 1 + 1 is not 2. It's actually, 3 or more, depending on the kind of skill sets and gaps that you fill with others. So what she learned through this process was to really help people be better leaders and involve them in the process early so that they feel that they're part of the process. And I think a lot of times we go off as leaders into a room and start making decisions and not getting the feedback that we want to get, so that people feel involved in the process and they feel like that it wasn't a bunch of people making decisions that don't understand their job or what their day-to-day is like. So what she found in her life is that what she had done a lot with her family situations and making sure her sister was okay, she was much more the peacemaker, and she really wants to make other people happy. So with that, she had to really truly understand what that was creating in her life, whether that be work or personally, to make sure that she wasn't overdoing to make other people happy. Because a lot of times we're doing that for our own self-worth, or we have to be really honest with ourselves about that and what is truly helpful, versus where we are enabling someone to not do the things that they can do and have the ability to do. So one of the things that she talked about was to create mirror champions. And so she said these are people that are really helpful to look to really give yourself an example of what you want to create for yourself. And do you see that in yourself, and do other people see that in you? And so through her process, she has identified those types of people in her life that can actually give her real feedback, and vice versa. But what she's found when she works with others to help them in the learning process and really take on leadership and innovation was 4 areas. And the first part of learning process is raising your hand that you want to be a part of it. A lot of people go by exception and might always look at the negative, that it might not work, instead of looking at the possibility and really being a part of the project to really determine if it is actually doable or not. The second one was to be curious and make sure that you have what I would call awe, that feeling of what is possible and that excitement of, that we might be creating something so amazing that will change people's lives, even if it's a little thing. And the third thing we talked about was taking on new projects, and that some people enjoy more maintenance work. And this is something we have to be honest with ourselves. If we really are more in the maintenance mode versus liking to start a new project all the time and really putting together puzzle pieces, those are good observations about ourselves to make sure that we are the right person to work on a project. And the last one was value execution, and making sure that the things that you do create value and how you evaluate that along the way. So we also talked about what can hold back innovation and the things to look for when you're going through an innovation process. And the first one was fear of failure can hold back change. And so it's really important that we apply that learning process into this, about that growth mindset, about the curiosity, and how we really push past that negativity or preconceived notions without knowing if something will work. The second thing was thinking past the first impression and the first thought, that what if that wasn't true? And that assumption that we might be making that it wouldn't work, can we get rid of those assumptions in the innovation process? So is it the worst possible thing that the worst possible thing would be? And we keep going down that path to make sure that we can live with what that worst possible thing would be, and how we can actually put guardrails around that so that we can get comfort with the people that we need to get comfort with so that we can push past on this project. The last part was getting to know people personally. That as you get to know people in different departments, or it might be customers that you're trying to help through change and so forth, that it's important that they feel like you care about them personally, that you're not just there pushing an agenda, that you really show that you're listening to them, that you're getting rid of any bias that you might have, and that you're helping them connect to this future version of themselves or the organization that they're going to feel nurtured and supported to get there. And so there was just so many lessons in this podcast that I'm sure many of you can take away when you're going into this innovation process into your organization, but also really recognizing what are those belief systems that might be holding you back, that might be holding others back, so that you can push past it and get to this curious state, that state of awe, of excitement of what you're going to be doing, and really understanding why you're doing what you're doing, and realizing that there's no singular path to get to where you want to go, that there might be multiple options, but it's all about that curiosity through the process to make it an exciting process, a delightful process, and remember to build in fun as you go about it. So I want to thank Avalara for sponsoring this podcast today, and also for any of you that are looking for sales tax automation and all of the different products that Avalara offers. You can go to avalara.com/accountants, or you can email Avalara at accountants@avalara.com. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and it would be helpful to your organization or the people that you work with. So please share it, subscribe to it, and make sure that everyone benefits from the great advice of all these leaders that come onto this podcast, because when we are more aware of the belief systems that might be holding us back, we can actually start the little steps toward change and be able to create the life that we desire. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.